Story of the day, the inauguration of Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Now joining us in the studio is political analyst Mutumwa Mawere to talk, of course, about the economic prospects of Zimbabwe. Where to for now? Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mawere, this evening.
Yeah.
Look, before we went to air, we were talking about already Emmerson Mnangagwa going into this office. There's already a trust deficit. If you look at ZANU-PF as well as the official opposition, where to from here for Zimbabwe? Because already you also have the MDC alliance itself digging its heels in, not accepting the election results, despite the inauguration.
I think it talks to the journey of independence. If you look at 1980 and 2018, 38 years later, the trust deficit is actually widening. It's not narrowing. And if you look at the urban areas, virtually there is no trust. People don't trust their government. They don't trust their institutions, including the courts. Imagine after the Constitutional Court has made a ruling, still that doesn't resolve that trust issue. The question is, what is it that Zimbabwe requires, not for external people, but to find peace within the country? If you are believable, credible, the credibility shows in the mood of the people. And if this change speaks to the aspirations of the people or to the ideal that independence promised, then you can see people excited like they were excited in 1980. Now, 38 years later, if you ask them, do you trust your public office bearers? Notwithstanding what can be said, you can have slogans saying let's have peace, unity, but on the ground, what is it? How come people don't believe what is being said? And if that is not cured, you can't even make the next step, because the next step requires faith. What moves nations is hope, faith. And this idea that tomorrow is going to be a better place. If you look at people who go across the Mediterranean, Africans looking for a better future, if you tell them in Libya, go back to Niger where you came from, to Nigeria, they will say, no, I've come this far. And where I'm going, that's where my spirit is.
What is it going to take for President Emmerson Mnangagwa to inspire that kind of faith in his people? I tend to agree with you, because I recall from the time that the election results had been announced by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, of course, depending on where you were in the country, whether there were celebrations or they were not. Of course, in Harare, that being an MDC stronghold, you're not going to get any celebrations.
That's right.
There are no celebrations this evening as well, following this inauguration. But what is it going to take immediately to try and get Zimbabweans excited about what some are referring to as possibly a new Zimbabwe?
If you look at constitutionalism, do people trust their judges? You may discover that the majority of the people actually don't have trust. So it requires trust to rebuild it. If you look at the rule of law, not ruled by men, then what is it that is required to restore that confidence that the law applies equally to everybody? If you look at the idea of state capture, is the government of Zimbabwe captured by a few people who believe they have a better claim to the government than everybody else, that they should govern irrespective of whether the country is going up or down? If that is not cured, how do you speak to somebody who is at border post, crossing not into Zimbabwe, but out of Zimbabwe? If you look at the refugees, the people who left the country, who are in the diaspora, do you see a mass exodus? People packing and say, I have to go, because it's now ISIS. You find that more white people are going to Zimbabwe. The planes are full. But black people, for some reason, they've lost that trust. So imagine you have a promissory note. You go to a bank, and the bank says your check has bounced because of insufficient funds. And you talk to that person to say, have hope. in a bank. And he looks at you, said, "Do you know how far I've come to have my check, my promise bounds?" 38 years. The same characters are still in government. And yet, on the ground, when you look at the pain, the anxieties, the suffering, just money, just to look at money. I deposit $100 in a bank. I can't get it out. Whatever you say, it must translate itself into the wallet.
We were saying that the proof is going to have to be in the pudding.
That's right.
And some would tend to think perhaps that change will come tomorrow in Zimbabwe. With all, I guess, the collapse of the institutions, with an economy that has not been functional for decades, what would Emmerson Mnangagwa need to do urgently?
In fact, that idea of personalizing change. One person has got 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 legs. You can't see what you don't know. Your body has to take you there. This idea of the Mugabeism, that one individual, what is required is shared values. There has to be some negotiation of what is good for everybody. This idea that one person being inaugurated like a pop star becomes the team, becomes the Ronaldo of Zimbabwe, becomes the Messi of Zimbabwe, the sooner that idea is exorcised from people's minds, the better. Because you are setting up someone to fail, or even to be indispensable, because there are many presidents think they know the universe. Even what is death? If somebody dies, I don't know. Is it death? How many presidents are prisoners in 5-star hotel rooms, air conditioning?
You speak about this individualism, Mr. Mawere, and I think that will bring me to my next question about would then this kind of inclusivity perhaps be a good idea for Emmerson Mnangagwa to involve the opposition, to get them on board, perhaps?
Not personalities, but values.
Values.
If we agree on values, clearly there is a disconnect on values. That's why Chamisa would rather wait outside the tent. If he believes that people inside the tent are going to take him where he thinks as a person, not 2 million voters, they've already done their job. Right now it's 2 individuals who can't even share the same vision for Zimbabwe. And they can't find each other.
But how possible? Do you think that they're anywhere closer to finding each other? Because as it stands, tonight it's all about Emmerson Mnangagwa, as the Sunday Times journalist was saying. But the people of Zimbabwe would like to wake up tomorrow and find some kind of change, even though that is not going to happen. You've got the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance also, on the other hand, looking to an African Union body on the next phase of challenging what the constitutional court of that country has already validated.
Because look at the human spirit. Someone leaves Guatemala, an 8-year child, going to America, and you catch that child and say, "Let me take you to Guatemala." He says, "No, please, I've come this far. Where I'm going is where my spirit is." That's what Chamisa is saying. That I don't believe the results. I won the election because I don't see how an alternative win speaks to the aspirations of the people I meet every day. So this retelling of the future, unless it's cured, how do you make peace when there's no faith, there's no trust? Where do you start?
Political analyst Mutumwa Mawere, thank you very much for joining us this evening, shedding some light and analysis on our top story here on SABC News. So we're taking a break once again.